After clearing what turned out to be the last of 16 stairs, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon saw, carved into the door a few inches lower than Carter had been able to see the first time, the royal sign of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. But Carter also saw signs that part of the door had been opened before and then resealed. After all their work, would they find an empty tomb? What do you think? Will the tomb be empty? For days, the crew worked to clear the rock-filled passageway, anxious to move ahead, but afraid of destroying anything important if they moved too fast. 32 feet in, they found another door. This one also had Tutankhamun's seal, and more signs that part of it had been broken open. Carter cut another hole, lit a candle, and looked through. The others, fairly dancing with excitement behind him, waited, but he said nothing, because, as it turned out, he could not speak. He was too overcome. At last, Carnarvon demanded, "Can you see anything?" Howard Carter turned slowly and answered, "Yes, wonderful things." What they saw was just a hint of what appeared several days later, when they opened that door and entered by the light of electric torches or flashlights. As those torches lit up the room beyond, light flashed back at the explorers, reflections in gold. There, shining in the torchlight, were a golden throne, a statue of a golden snake, couches made of gold, golden clothing draped over two large black stone statues, and much more. Looking around, Carter and Carnarvon saw ancient Egyptian art pieces of great beauty, some unlike any they had ever seen before. These were priceless, not only for the gold and jewels all around them, but also because they would give new clues to the religious beliefs and way of life of the ancient Egyptians. Priceless means worth more than any amount of money. Remember, archaeologists work to find out about the way people lived in the past by looking at what they left behind. Then one of Carter's assistants called, "There's another door!" Sure enough, there was another smaller room filled with more objects. But unlike those in the first room, these were thrown about as if a robber, feverishly searching through the riches of the place, had been interrupted and had left them behind in a hurry. But among all these wonders, something was missing. There was no mummy, nor even a mummy case or sarcophagus. A sarcophagus is a stone coffin. A mummy is the body of someone who has died, which has been wrapped in cloth. The mummy is placed in the sarcophagus. There was a moment of mixed triumph and disappointment. A triumph is a great success or accomplishment. But the surprises of that day were not over. As Carnarvon and Carter re-entered the first room, they glanced at the far wall and almost at the same moment shouted, "Look!" For in that wall they saw a fourth door. Why do you think there were so many doors? Well, one idea might be that they were trying to store all of Pharaoh's possessions, and he had quite a few. Another might be to keep the person and the treasure buried there safe, so that people were constantly having to move around, kind of like a maze. It may also have been that Pharaoh was trying to show off how many possessions he owned and how much space was needed to store them. Already they had found the largest, most valuable collection of ancient Egyptian treasures ever discovered. It would take several months before their team could examine everything and gently move it out. Finally, Howard Carter gently pulled away some stones atop the fourth door and, holding up a light, looked in. At his side, an assistant held up a microphone to carry Carter's words by radio around the world. Here is how Howard Carter later described what he saw beyond the door. There, within a yard of the doorway, stretching as far as one could see, stood a solid wall of gold. There was no clue as to its meaning, but with the removal of a very few stones, that mystery was solved. We were at the entrance of the actual burial chamber of the king. That which barred our way was the side of an immense golden shrine built to cover and protect the sarcophagus which held the long-lost Pharaoh. They had found the burial chamber of Tutankhamun almost 3,300 years after his death. The great cover surrounding his mummy case stood 18 feet wide, 11 feet long, and 9 feet high, all covered in gold. Carved into this were hieroglyphic symbols. The walls of the room were covered with hieroglyphic words and paintings of Tutankhamun and the Egyptian gods. The sarcophagus itself turned out to hold a series of cases, one inside the next, some of wood covered in gold. The innermost case, holding the mummy, would become one of the most famous images in the world. It was made of solid gold. Inside it was the king's mummy, with a mask over his face, made of gold and of shining blue stone. The discovery of King Tut and his treasures excited people all over the world. Wherever the news spread, people said, "We want to know more about ancient Egypt. We want to learn how we are different from those ancient Egyptians, and how we might be the same." Nearly 100 years later, people are still saying it. All this happened because two men, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon, wondered about someone who had lived more than 3,000 years before them, Tutankhamun, Pharaoh of Egypt.